just pop it into the chat and we'll be able to facilitate those questions. And then additionally, we're going to try to get to everybody today, but we might not be able to, but we can always follow up with the mayor and his team and answer any questions that may be on your mind at the end of the program. With that, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce those who may not know, also to Brandon Black, our Director of Public Policy on our team, who will be leading this conversation today. He'll kind of give us a quick and dirty on the measure itself, and then we will move on to Q&A. So with that, thank you again for being here. Thank you, Mayor, for your time and engagement, and thank you, membership, for being a part of the chamber, right? You get out of it what you put into it. So you being here today and engaging is, we are so grateful for you. With that, the floor is yours, Mr. Black. Take it away.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda, for the intro and for that table setting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to our membership today. I know we all certainly appreciate it. So thank you for your time. For this group to know, just a quick down and dirty on what Measure A is. It is the Sacramento Mayoral Accountability and Community Equity Act. Will be on the ballot this November. It would create a few differences in the structure of our city. The city manager would no longer be the chief executive. That power would lie with the elected mayor of the city of Sacramento. The mayor would no longer be a member of the council. The council would be expanded to 9 members. We'd have a new city council district. The mayor would propose and present the budget to the city council. It also limits the mayor to 2 terms. The Metro Chamber has taken a position of support of this ballot initiative. Sort of the thought process that we had as we went through and we vetted the proposal. It allows the city to respond more quickly in times of crisis. I know that we have all certainly been feeling the effects of COVID-19 right now. It's been a challenge, not just for small business, but for our community, our city, our state, our country, and quite honestly, the world. So the ability to respond quickly to those sorts of things is critical as we move forward as a society. It creates an easier to navigate bureaucracy by which to advocate for small business and for other communities of interest, and creates clear lines of accountability in city government, which just don't exist really right now as easily as they could. So with that, I would like to introduce Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg. He has served Sacramento in one fashion or another in this community for over 20 years. He's the first Sacramentan in over 125 years to be elected by his colleagues to lead the state Senate for California. And he's here to present the proposal of Measure A, the Sacramento Mayoral Equity and Community Equity Act. So, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Brandon, thank you very, very much for the introduction and for leading the forum here today. You do a great job, as does Amanda. I'm so grateful for our partnership, Erica, Jasmine, all of the staff and the members. You know, it didn't always have such a strong partnership with the Metro Chamber of Commerce. And I am really more than pleased that we do have that partnership and that we do work together so closely. And I'm honored to have earned the endorsement of not only the Metro Chamber, but the Sacramento Asian Chamber, the Bill Black Coalition, the Economic Development Coalition, advocating on behalf of the African American community, the Latino Economic Council, and a wide variety of diverse community leaders. I want to leave most of the time, of course, to answer your question, but I want to translate the words of the measure into the question that matters most to any voter and certainly to any stakeholder that loves the city of Sacramento. And that's all of us, whether we're on the pro yes side or the no side of Measure A. We all love our city. We may argue about the means to the end, but we all want really the same things. I want to tell you some real stories that I think will illustrate what actual difference this measure could make. Because as you know, the way that the city structure works now is that the city manager, and I always say, and because I mean it, we have a great city manager in the city. For this system of governance, it couldn't ask for a better partner, but the city manager is not elected. He's appointed by 9 members of the city council. The mayor, who is the only citywide elected official, has the same vote as 8 members who are elected by 1/8 of the city, the respective city council districts. The mayor does not have the authority to introduce the budget. He or she does not have any executive powers, including emergency powers. And once he or she convinces the city council, which I've been pretty good at, to set a particular policy direction, the question of implementation then gets relitigated and re-argued, often multiple times, because the city manager hears from 9 members, including the mayor, about what is the priority and how should the particular direction of the council be implemented. And so here is my first example for you. Homelessness is a plague on our city. It is not only a humanitarian crisis, it's a public safety crisis. The number of calls that our police and fire department have to take addressing people who are often sick and in crisis situations is astronomical. The impact on the business community. I hear about this more than any other issue. And so it isn't just my mental health background or the fact that I believe in social and human services that drives me as mayor of the city. It's the fact that this is the single most consequential issue in terms of affecting our quality of life and standing in the way of all of our potential. Here's the story. I want to tell you about the city of San Diego that has an Accountable Mayor initiative. On September the 13th, 2017, the city of San Diego at City Council passed a policy direction that authorized the city, through the mayor, who was the executive, to start constructing what are the coin of the realm in this area, sprung shelters, quality, military-style structures that enable us to get hundreds of people inside at a time. They approved that policy on September the 13th of 2017. They opened their first sprung shelter 2.5 months later, December the 1st, 350 beds. They opened their second shelter with 150 beds on December 22nd, 3 weeks later. And then 2 weeks after that, on January 4th of 2018, they opened another shelter with 200 beds. In 113 days, they opened shelter space sufficient to bring 700 people indoors. The city of Sacramento. I have brought more money to this city, and we've hardly used any of our city general fund money, a little bit in one tranche, but it's mostly been state and federal money, and I led the big 13 mayors to get the state to contribute millions of dollars to this effort. We obviously have our CARES funds. I've raised a lot of private money. In August of 2019, now almost 14 months ago, the city council approved a sprung shelter in the south area on Meadowview Road. It was controversial, but the city council voted, I believe it was 6-3, to approve that shelter. Today is September the 24th, 2020, and the shelter is still not operating. It's still not operating. It's not operating because homelessness, number one, is not really a core priority of the city. It's traditionally been a county function, but let's be honest, 3 out of 5 members don't represent an inch of the city. And so the plea that we hear from the River District, or we hear from the downtown or midtown business associations, or the commercial corridor associations, the PBIDs, or the Metro Chamber about moving faster and moving more effectively. It's a city responsibility. And yet, because it's not been defined by the city culture and tradition, and 9 members have different points of view about how much of a priority it should be, 14 months, and it's still not operating. I want to give you another example. In May of this year, in the course of the pandemic, I publicly called in my Facebook Live chats that I had several times a week for a mandatory mask requirement in the city. Our recent community survey says that 93% of Sacramentans believe in a mandatory mask requirement. And in May, by the way, it wasn't all the craze. It was kind of controversial. And when I said this and began preparing the ordinance to bring it forward, I received massive pushback from a number of my city council colleagues. And yes, I could have brought it to the city council, and we could have had a 2-week debate or 3-week debate that would have, gone back and forth at a 5-4 vote, and maybe we would have prevailed. The city manager, because the council was divided and he actually holds the emergency powers, could not act because he had a divided council. Governor Newsom, on June the 9th, 2020, issued a statewide mandatory order. And that became, of course, then the order for the city and county of Sacramento. 1 month went by between my publicly advocating for this emergency order and the state finally setting in to accomplish it. If I had been mayor under a Measure A system, would have had the ability and would have exercised the ability to appropriately mandate masks in the city. It doesn't happen under this structure because power, and I know that's a word that is sensitive now to a lot of people and to all of us, is distributed so broadly, and the management is responsible for operating the city. And so the other things, whether it be economic development, whether it be homelessness, do not get the priority and the urgency that they deserve. Now, some people have asked me, a lot of people ask me, what is your view on public safety? I get this all over the place. Yesterday, I was quoted in one media outlet as saying that it wanted to shift $100 million or more from the police department to this new Office of Community Non-Law Enforcement Response, which is wholly inaccurate. Another publication said that I want to increase public safety funding. So let me tell you where I stand. Police and fire services should always have the lion's share of the city budget, always, because they are the core functions that a city must prioritize. They must prioritize. And whether A passes or not, as long as I am mayor, and I will be mayor, by the way, for another 4+ years, that will be the city's priority. The debate that we have around this measure, and maybe some of the themes of my mayorship, is that I believe that we have to be creative, effective, and efficient to free up enough space so that we can actually have an investment strategy around growing up a modern, inclusive economy, where communities and neighborhoods desperately need the help, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's workforce development, whether it is helping small businesses get the seed capital that they need to start or to grow their businesses, whether it's investing the infrastructure dollars in some of our forgotten commercial corridors that could be jewels of our city and raise the economic and the tax base for our entire city. The CARES Act frankly, is a great demonstration of what we could do if we were committed systemically to raising the tax base. And by the way, raising the tax base allows us to more consistently provide and expand public safety services in our city. Look what we did with CARES. We took $89 million, which couldn't be used for the city's general fund, and we put it in, we worked with the Metro Chamber and all the other chambers, and we were aggressive about putting money into businesses that needed the lifeline. How many businesses, I believe 1,400 of them or so, are receiving direct aid and benefit as a result of the CARES Act. Millions of dollars into workforce development, digital skills upgrades for people who are trying to become more competitive in the new emerging technology and innovation economy. There is so much more we can do if we are creative and we expand the breadth, just a little bit, of what we see as our core responsibilities and core functions as a city. And I believe that the system for Measure A, and by the way, you know, those of you who don't love me, one of the great elements of this is that it only keeps me around for 4 more years. So that's reason enough to support the initiative. But yes, it's about me in the short term, but it's really about the future of the city that's growing up. The city is trying to build a bigger tax base, become more cosmopolitan, be the center of creativity and a creative economy and sports and all the other things. We need some skin in the game here to be able to be a partner and to be able to be a catalyst. And this form of government where your mayor is elected by the people to follow through on a set of priorities and a vision is one of 9 votes and doesn't have any executive tools, I don't think is in the long-term best interest of the city. This is not an over-concentration of power, by the way, because it empowers the city council as well. If you get a rogue mayor or a mayor that you disagree with or that the community disagrees with or that the public employee unions disagree with in any way, all it takes, first of all, it takes 5 votes to pass a budget. The mayor can't spend a dime on any of his ideas unless the city council says yes. And then if the mayor and the council have a disagreement, it only takes 6 to overturn a mayor's wrong, quote, wrong decision. They get 6 votes at City Hall, you know, practically every Tuesday, depending on the issue. But this would allow us to lead with greater clarity, especially on the implementation side. The city manager reporting to 9 CEOs means that implementation is dictated in reality by 9 people. It doesn't get our work done as fast as it should get done, with as much clarity, and it frustrates the community when they say, why aren't you moving faster? I thought you decided this, but now this is happening. Why is it 14 months and the shelter is not up and running and getting more people off the streets? So I put this out here for your consideration and the consideration of the voters in the community. And I have faith in the voters. And I think it's a really good and important debate for all of Sacramento. And I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for taking the time to explain that to us and certainly for that dialogue. We'll open it up for questions if folks, again, if you have any questions, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom. I will get us started off. We do have some questions that we received before we got here today, and we do have some coming in through the chat now. So, Mr. Mayor, with recent calls for police reform and social justice in our city, and businesses impacted by property damage due to looting and rioting, how will an accountable mayor form of government protect our city and businesses in the case these events happen again in the future?
Well, first of all, I have to say, and maybe this isn't the answer that the questioner wants to hear, but I think by and large, our police department and our fire department has done a really good job responding to these crises, including the protests. Now, it's true that in June of this year, we had two very, very bad nights that resulted in a lot of damage, unacceptable damage to our businesses. I know that our police department walks a very, very fine line, because Chief Hahn would say, I believe, if he were on this call, that to send officers in to a group of 150 people wearing masks and umbrellas and all the other business raises the great threat that whatever broken window or graffiti is going on will actually lead to an escalation and even greater damage and the risk of physical injury to both the officers and or the public, the peaceful protesters. And so part of their mission is to de-escalate, to ensure that the damage is minimal. Now in August, late August, when we had the second round, that technique actually worked. Now in June, nobody knew how big it would be, or that there would be so many, or at least a number of protesters bent on destruction. The criticism that I think, or at least the observation that I think is fair, is to ask the question, should we have called for a curfew and a National Guard a night earlier? If you remember, there were two nights, and then on the third night, we brought in curfew and National Guard, and then that was it. The first night was unexpected. The second night is open to debate. And I guess I would answer the question this way. If I had this authority, learning the lessons from what we have learned and gleaned over the summer, I would err on the side of calling the curfew earlier and bringing in the necessary supports to protect against that damage. That's what I would do.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer, Mr. Mayor. Looks like Chef Mulvaney has a question for us. We have trying to unmute you, Jeff.
All right, am I on?
Yep, you are on. Floor is
Did I
yours.
get it? All right. Hey, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate it. As you know, I supported Measure, or whatever Measure A was called last time, right? Because in the kitchen,
Yeah.
it's impossible to have too many people in charge. I also think that this is the wrong time. But I agree with Rob Turner, and I really found that his piece in his magazine compelling to say that it's always going to be the wrong time, and we should have a mayor that we can throw the bums out if you, in fact, turn into a bum. I'm concerned, though, that Howard Chan is a really good city manager, and we've had a string of good city managers, and that gives me a little reticence. So the one question is, how do you make sure that your relationship with the manager on the street is still doing well? Second is, how do we make sure that I don't have my staff picking up poop around the back and around the restaurant every day, for lack of a better word? And then third, when you say that you get to 6 at city council, I would suggest that the number that I'm concerned about living in Sacramento is 3. And I look at the board of supervisors as more of a warning rather than your collegial body that you sit on.
Well, if you want to use the Board of Supervisors as an example, they have an appointed chief executive who, whether with the consent or not of the majority of the board, unclear, took all the CARES money and, high proportion of the CARES money and spend it on the county's general fund. Let me first answer in general the question about, is this the good time or bad time? I thought a lot about this. And as you know, I did not start my mayorship like my predecessor, where this was the dominant theme of everything that I've done. I mean, I've had a pretty good run in 3.5 years. I just think it could be better. Why now? Now because never before have I felt such a searing amount of pressure from stakeholders on all sides, and never have I felt more accountable. I mean, when 2000, I know you host a lot of people at your restaurant, but I had 2,000 people over over to my house, in June, and it was actually a beautiful, dignified, peaceful protest, die-in, they called it, and so it really was moving for me. But it also, I mean, just crystallized for me that the mayor of this city is accountable and yet doesn't have any executive tool to be able to follow through more assertively on what the majority of people are demanding. And so that's why I feel like if some people would say this is the wrong time, I actually think it's the most important time because of the level of accountability and expectation that all people in Sacramento have. It's not just the protesters, it's everybody. On the Howard Chan question, I've said it very publicly. I think I have, but let me say it here. This is all being recorded. If Measure A passes, I am hiring Howard Chan as the city manager. Period, end of story. I cannot imagine working with anybody else. He is a man of great integrity. He is hardworking. He knows the city. He's got good relationships. He would continue, by the way, under Measure A to hire and fire the department heads. That was a clear distinction that we made in the ballot measure. And Howard, I'd go to the moon with Howard any day. So odds he stays. I just saw your little chat comment, Patrick. Why don't you ask him? Because I think he would tell you that if this passes, he will in fact stay. I'm not speaking for him. Can't do that. But Howard and I have a great partnership, and I look forward to that partnership under either form of government for the next 4 years. But you should ask him that question directly.
Excellent. Thank you, Chef, for the questions. Thank you, Mayor, for the responses. I know that Jenna Abbott from the River District has a few questions for you today, but is having some technical difficulties, and Erica Bjork from our team has those questions for you. So, okay, Erica, we'll get you unmuted here.
Thank you very much. So, Mayor, from Jenna, and she apologizes. We know from a few of these calls she's had some audio challenges. A few questions she has. One is, would like some examples of what inclusive economic development looks like in your eyes. And with that in mind, why this, Accountable Mayor initiative was bundled with the economic development instead of being a separate measure. So if maybe you could address those two things, it would be great.
Sure. Inclusive economic development has been defined nationally, and I think it's beginning to be defined in our community through the initial implementation of Measure U, and then the CARES Act decisions that we make, as investing reasonable city resources matched with the private sector and community-based organizations around issues that will uplift all communities, but especially disadvantaged communities economically. What are the elements? The elements are our workforce training and development, of which we spent about $10 million of our CARES Act money directly on some cutting edge workforce development initiatives. It means having the capacity to have an affordable housing trust fund in this city. Oh my God, what a desperate need we have. It's not homelessness, but the failure to address the affordable housing crisis in our city is what helps lead to increased homelessness. And then we get frustrated and throw up our hands and ask, why are there so many people on the street? Inclusive economic development means having the capital to be able to help small businesses and new businesses and startups either loan or grant them the resources, as we have done during the CARES period, to be able to start a business or to be able to grow a business. Inclusive economic development means investing in our forgotten commercial corridors. This was one of the original motivations of Measure U, which was that, oh my God, we have such diverse, rich commercial corridors that have been forgotten, not by the PBIDs and not by some of the business owners that hang in there through thick and thin, but by the city. Why can't Franklin Boulevard and Stockton Boulevard and Del Paso Boulevard and Northgate Boulevard be centers of economic activity and cool places for people to, go on the weekends or during the weeknights? Inclusive economic development includes investing in a creative economy, which is going to be a key strategy to attract more people and more industry to this city. If we've got a vibrant creative economy around art and around tourism, that's inclusive economic development. I've never said, and I don't believe, that the city can do it all. And I want to emphasize again, I don't believe that any of these priorities should in any way displace the core functions of a city, which is to provide public safety, to maintain the parks, and to provide the essential services to people. But we are growing and growing up, and if we don't build that tax base and create more opportunity for people from all neighborhoods, then we are going to be a city of, sorry for the cliche, of haves and have-nots. Neighborhoods that are doing well, tree-lined, beautiful neighborhoods, and those that are struggling. So we need to be active partners. And I don't believe that this system gives us the drive, the oomph, and the clarity that all of our communities deserve.
And Mayor, maybe with that, one quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
So obviously with Measure A, there is the element to it that is protecting this 40 million towards, as you've put, inclusive economic development. You've mentioned CARES Act dollars, which were kind of one-time funding, even though it was positioned as a recovery. In short, for this huge need, which will be beyond 40 million, where is the money coming from? And again, appreciate your viewpoint to raise the tax base and not, let's just say, raise taxes. Just for this group, where do you see that funding source coming from?
First of all, the $40 million, which I know is controversial, is an aspiration. It is an aspiration. There is no anti-supplantation clause in the ballot measure. Let me tell you where sometimes I become, and I'm not looking for any sympathy here, but where I kind of become the man in the middle a little bit in terms of pleasing everyone or displeasing everyone. I'm not sure which. But for some people, the expectation is and was that we're going to take $40 million of general fund money every single year and we're going to put it into the categories that I described. And yes, that is my aspiration. But when COVID hit and the sales tax went down, what did we do? And I've been criticized for this, especially by the activists and the Measure U Advisory Committee and others. I said, along with the city manager, we are not going to lay off city workers. We're not going to cut public safety. Instead, what we are going to do is we are going to take this CARES money, and yes, it's one time, and we are going to invest it as if it were Measure U money. Even though there were different rules, right? A lot of the money has to be spent by December 31st, 2021. We had to kind of do a little square peg, round hole thing, but we did. And so when you look at the amount of money invested in inclusive economic development, the initial 30 or 35 million for Measure U before COVID hit, and a huge percentage of the $89 million from CARES, I could make an argument, and I'll make it here today, that we are actually well ahead of what I promised the voters. Green is green. And one of the things I'm pretty good at is being creative about how to find the resources to meet the need. And I'm not saying money grows on trees, because I know it doesn't. But you know, we have these endless debates and discussions at City Hall about vacant positions, even on the non-public safety side, that sit there for years, worth millions of dollars that we fund every year. We've gotten a report about how we could be more efficient as a city around energy use, save millions of dollars a year. I mean, where there's wills, there are ways, as we have demonstrated over these last couple of months. And sometimes hard choices have to be made, but we've done pretty darn well in this period of time. I just think we could do better. And back to Jenna for a moment, because I know that Jenna has understandably, on behalf of her constituents, expressed great frustration about the overconcentration of homeless services in the River District. I agree with you. Please refer back, if you would, to the example that I gave at the very top of this discussion about the way the siting of homeless services, shelters, motels, hotels, happens in this city. It is a bit of a cluster. And it is a cluster because it is not a core function again of our city as it's seen, even though it is. I've asked 9 members to each put forward sites for 100 or 200 beds. And then you have the implementation, which I said, look at Meadowview, takes forever. It can be much better, and I think providing relief to the River District, frankly, I'll pick the sites and I'll take the heat happily, because it's better than taking the heat that I feel not only publicly but inside my own gut, that we're not making enough progress.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another question that came up in the chat, and really quickly before I read it again, if anybody has a question, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom. If you're having trouble with that, that's okay. If you can turn your camera on and raise your hand, that works too, and we'll catch you that way. But we did receive a number of questions before we got here today, so I will work off of that for now. Mr. Mayor, under an accountable mayor form of government, you would propose the city budget as opposed to the city manager.
Correct.
What is the benefit of that provision, and how does it correlate with us being a business-friendly city?
Well, rather than taking a city manager's budget, any city manager's budget, which is by definition going to be about how to fund the core operations of the city government, the mayor would be able to propose that plus an economic development strategy, not only with dollars, but also with implementation strategies and plans. So this is a legislative reference, and I'll try not to get into the weeds, but it's resonant to me. When a governor introduces a budget in January of every calendar year, he also introduces what are called trailer bills. And the public may not know what a trailer bill is, but everyone who works in and around state government understands what it is. A trailer bill is the implementation plan for their proposed budget. And both the budget and the trailer bills get negotiated with the legislature. And when the budget is passed, the trailer bill then actually defines over what time period are you going to get these dollars out? Where, in fact, are you going to spend these dollars? How are you going to spend these dollars? What are the outcomes and the evaluation process that is going to be expected? We do all of that now, frankly, by the seat of our pants. Look at the CARES process, which I'm very complimentary of, because I think the city staff and everybody did a good job. But if we really want to be honest about it, could it have been done faster? Could the money have gotten out faster? I think so. Under Measure A, I would have put out not just my letter that I put out that guided the discussion back in May. I would have put forward a specific implementation plan. And then that guides the city council and guides the discussion, or the city council can reject it and do it their own way if they choose. But if you have good relationship with the members, which I do, and I would, despite, you know, our differences sometimes, but that's politics, we'll move with greater clarity.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Erica, turn it over to you. I think we've got some questions in the chat.
Yep. So we have a question from Chris Andrew. So Mayor Steinberg, can please give us the research or data that shows how much the return on investment will be on this inclusive economic development plan? If the city invests $40 million annually in inclusive economic development, can you tell us how much that will increase our tax base, sales tax income, you know, new revenue, or similar? Like, in essence, how would you measure the metrics, the data, and the ROI on this investment?
Well, the answer, I think, depends wholly on how we invest the money. And how do you put an ROI on 10,000 additional units of affordable housing that allow people to own their own home? How do you put an ROI on being able to help 1,000 new entrepreneurs start their own business? How do you put an ROI on investing millions of dollars in major economic initiatives like Aggie Square or the Mobility Center, where our partners, UC Davis, SMUD, and the private sector, are going to put in significantly more money than what we put in? And so it all depends, I think, on how we choose to spend the money. But I know this, and we've had this discussion, Chris, a number of times. If you look at the presentation of the city budget and the 2019 city budgets, we have significant pension debt and long-term health insurance debt, healthcare debt, retiree health debt. And so I guess there are two responses to dealing with that. One is to try to cut what hardworking public safety officers on the police and fire side have earned, and that's never where I have stood. Or it's to try to create, yes, a broader tax base so that the city brings in more tax revenue and we can support paying the people who put their lives on the line on our behalf. And so I'm happy to follow up and get any data about other cities. The Brookings Institution, I know, has done a series of reports on how inclusive economic development actually uplifts communities and uplifts our tax base. But depending on how you spend the money, that's the key piece. Depending on how you spend it, will then determine whether or not and by how much you actually have an impact on tax revenues. But I mean, you look at economic development, you look at, for example, the arena where the city put its parking money into. There's a multi-million-dollar tax return on investment. The same thing for the soccer stadium, where we're doing an EIFD, in lieu property tax, to invest in that. We know from our experience with big projects that the ROI is in the millions of dollars that we wouldn't otherwise have to support public safety.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. One from the chat just now. Sacramento has been known for its strong nonprofit presence, which is especially struggling right now. If Measure A passes, is there anything you do in your power to help on the nonprofit sector in Sacramento?
Well, certainly when it comes to inclusive economic development, again, or investing in our youth, the nonprofits in our community play a crucial role. And again, I would say that if past is prologue, look at what we did with the small business allocation under our CARES Act funding. We didn't just grant the money for givable loans to small businesses. We actually invested millions of dollars in the Metro Chamber and other CBOs to help provide the technical assistance and the navigation for your members to be able to access these funds. And so the CBOs, the government, I've never said, never will claim that government can do it all. In fact, government doesn't do it best. We're the catalyst. And where we have the resources, whether it's through CARES or in any other way, we can then spark in the right way the kind of community engagement and community improvement that we all want to see. And so nonprofits play a crucial role, and we haven't hesitated, as you've seen over these last couple of months, to put resources directly into our nonprofits to enhance their role.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mayor. And then finally, before we go to closing, will there be an opportunity to revisit Measure A in the future once it's adopted?
Well, first of all, there is a 10-year sunset written into the measure, but there's actually a implicit tool to be able to revisit this anytime you want. One of the things, we talk about concentrated power. As I said earlier, this measure enhances the power of the city council as well. The city council would have plenary authority over land use decisions, separate from the mayor. The city council would, of course, write the budget. The mayor could not spend money without the city council approving it. And third, the city council would have plenary authority, separate from the mayor, to place any charter amendment on the ballot it chooses at any time. So in 2022, 2024, 2026, 2028, any special election in between, a majority, not even 6 members of a city council, could say, we want to change this, or we want to go back to the old system. And they could do it. And the mayor could say, why are you doing this? The mayor wouldn't have a vote. So yes, the council could revisit this on behalf of the people at any time. I don't think that would be necessary, because I think people would see that they have even more confidence in their city government, because we would do what we already do well, but we would do even more and better in the areas where people are demanding attention, where we could be more effective than we currently are.
Excellent. Well, we have about 5 minutes left on this call. I think we've had a very robust conversation here today. I certainly appreciate all of our members for joining us, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. I want to leave the floor open for you for our last 5 minutes. If there's anything in closing that you would like to leave with us.
I think the questions were really comprehensive, and the discussion was great. And I really just appreciate the opportunity to be able to make my case, to be able to have the dialogue, to be able to talk with supporters, opponents, and people who are in between. We all love our city, and we all have this aspiration for the city to be even more than it is. And certainly we have not only an aspiration, but we have an obligation to reach towards those communities and those people and those young people who feel that they're not part of the great Sacramento Renaissance. And to do all we can, not alone, but in partnership with the business community, with the law enforcement community, with the public safety community, with the CBO community, to make sure that everyone feels that they have a shot at what we're creating here in this new Sacramento. I believe growing up our governance in a way that is consistent with where the city is going is an important part of that change. And that's why I, but not just I, Councilmember Angelique Ashby. You know, Angelique likes to say in our various appearances that, you know, she and I have had our difference over the years. I think she's a great public official and a great colleague. She's strongly in favor of this. The vast majority of the city council. And you know, no matter what, I'm going to be around for 4 more years, and I will give you my all, no matter what happens. I just would like to see the city grow up its governance here, and I appreciate the chamber's support and appreciate all of your time and attention today. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you again so much, Mr. Mayor. To our membership on the line, if we didn't get to your question, apologize. Please reach out to me, Erica, or Jasmine. We will get you some answers from the Measure A campaign if we weren't able to get to them today. My email, bblack@metrochamber.org. Always feel free to reach out. We are here to support you. Thank you all for attending today. Really appreciate it. Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to your team, and we will see you all soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.